Hello everyone, it's me, Yukina Takanashi again. Today I will be explaining the large family tree of my ongoing Toji No Miko medieval fantasy fanfiction, Bloody Crown. Specifically for this video, I will be explaining the first arc, which covers everything from chapter 1 to chapter 19. Currently, I am writing arc 2 of Bloody Crown, and once I am done that, I will make another video. For your information, there will be 3 arcs in total, and therefore 3 videos. But anyway, let's begin. Before we look at the family tree, let's look at a map. This is a map I created on Wonderdraft, which is a software I use to make all my campaign maps for Dungeons & Dragons. The entire story of Bloody Crown takes place in the country of the Kamakura Empire, where the population is mostly comprised of humans and vampires. In the empire, there are 5 kingdoms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. With the capital being the island city of Tolkien Josai, where the royal family of the House of Origami presides. However, in each kingdom, there is a noble house in charge of that specific area. We have the House of Hashima in the kingdom of Minoseki, the House of Gojo in the kingdom of Heijo, the House of Takatsu in the kingdom of Renpu, the House of Soraku in the kingdom of Ayano-koji, and the House of Manawa in the kingdom of Osafune. Now, at the beginning of the story, the kingdoms of Ayano-koji and Osafune are declared independent from the Kamakura Empire, and had split ties with the House of Origami. The reason behind this is because of a civil war sparked by a power struggle between the House of Origami and the House of Hiiragi, a conflict that spanned for generations. This civil war was known as the Cousins' War. And to explain the Cousins' War, we'll have to go back to how it first started. Let's look at the family tree now. But first let's zoom in a little. Can't read that tiny font like this. Okay, so several hundreds of years ago, before the Origamis took the throne, the Kamakura Empire was ruled by a different noble house, the royal house of Aradama. The Aradamas were a family of immortal vampires, and during their reign, humans and vampires managed to coexist in peace. The first seeds of war were sown by the deaths of the 3 royal Aradama sisters, Princess Tagitsu, Princess Takiri, and Princess Ichikishima. All their souls were permanently sealed in separate magical looking glasses known as the Myoga mirrors. Their deaths left lingering claims to the Kamakura throne amongst their various offspring, who were branches of their former royal family. We have the House of Atago, descended from Tagitsu, the House of Origami, descended from Takiri, and the House of Hiiragi, descended from Ichikishima. The House of Atago was believed to be completely wiped out near the beginning of the Cousins' War, leaving only the Origamis and the Hiiragis left to vie for the throne. All these feuds involved with the Civil War end in Origami victories, because the Hiiragis are in fact a cursed magical bloodline of sorcerers and sorceresses who always cause their own undoings through corruption. Despite sporadic unrest, it is the House of Origami that ultimately keeps the Kamakura throne during the Cousins' War. Now, I'm not going to go through every event that occurs in Bloody Crown because there's simply far too many. I'm only going to brush over the events that explain who is the real heir to the Kamakura throne and briefly explain how everyone is related to each other. I will try to explain how the story has developed so far in chronological order as best as I can to avoid any confusion, since there are a lot of flashbacks involved. Okay, let's begin. Currently, Origami Yukari is the ruling monarch of the Kamakura Empire. Her mother, Origami Nariko IV, was married to Origami Yoshikazu, who was a distant cousin. One of the first things that happened is that Nariko divorces her husband to marry her lover, Duke Hiiragi Yuto. Yuto had originally been married to Hiiragi Tsukiko, but left his wife after he found out she was having a secret affair with Duke Yoshino Ruichi. They had an illegitimate daughter named Iroha. This is why Kagari and Iroha are half-sisters. The marriage between Nariko and Yuto gives way to a new religious feud in the empire, as Nariko broke ties with the national religion, the Church of Amaterasu, to create her own, called the Church of Aradama, so that she could marry Yuto. This is known as the Kamakuran Reformation. Yukari is angry since she loved her father and was stripped of her royal title, which was given instead to her stepsister, Kagari. Yukari gets her cousin, Yukina, and her parents, Arata and Himeko, to poison her mother, Nariko, and provide incriminating evidence against Yuto for the crime. Yuto is then declared guilty of high treason and is executed. And this is how Yukari claimed the throne. She became queen at the age of 12. We'll fast forward a bit to approximately 20 years before present day. In order to avoid any confrontational tension with Yukari, Kagari swears loyalty to her by becoming a vampire hunter. She eventually is promoted to the high position of protector of the Kamakura Empire. But Yukari was still paranoid about Kagari, as Kagari had several supporters who preferred her on the throne instead. This suspicion Yukari has against her stepsister only escalates when she discovers that Kagari was secretly in love with this woman here, Minato. She was a noble, immortal vampire from the house of Fujiwara. She actually was already married to Count Eto Shigeru. They had 2 small children, Tamaki and Kanami. Shigeru's biological sister was Toko, and that is why Kanami and Mai are cousins. Anyway, Yukari has Kagari engaged to her second cousin, Lord Jujo Sota, but Kagari runs away back to Minato. Yukina informs Yukari of Kagari's escape, and of course this angers the queen. Together, Yukina and Yukari, along with their armies, go after Kagari. This leads to what is known as the Fujiwara Castle Massacre. By the end of it, almost everyone on this part of the family tree is dead. Only Kanami and Mai remain. Minato's death awakens Kagari's ancestral magic through her grief, and she swears revenge on Yukari. Kagari, now an evil sorceress, is forced to marry Sota. Now that we understand Kagari's backstory, let's turn back to the rest of the origami family. Yukari married her cousin, Origami Kohei. They had a son named Jun. Yukari's younger sister Akane was a devout follower of the Church of Amaterasu. Her main goal was to undo the Kamakuran Reformation and destroy the Church of Aradama. One of the key things that happens is that Akane launches an all-out rebellion against her elder sister after Yukari banished the house of Maniwa from court for siding with the house of Mashiko, which coexisted with vampires. Sana and her husband Shota used to serve in the High Council, the main government of the empire, which was also comprised of the leading houses in the other kingdoms. Emma and Tomoharu from the house of Hashima, Iroha and Daiki from the house of Gojo, and Yukina and Ryo from the house of Takatsu. What made Akane so annoyed with her sister was how Yukari replaced the Maniwas with the leaders of the house of Shido, Kaito, and Misaki. They are the parents of Maki. Misaki is the younger sister of Yukina, and that's why Maki calls her aunt. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Anyway, let's continue on with Akane. The house of Maniwa were likewise also strong supporters of the Church of Amaterasu, with their removal, Akane was not any closer to undoing the Kamakuran Reformation. She implores for help from Kagari as an ally, since Kagari hates Yukari more than anyone. Akane then escapes to the island kingdom of Osafune, which she declares independent from the empire and establishes the Mokusa Republic with her as the monarch. So, now we have two queens, Queen Yukari and Queen Akane. Let's fast forward a bit more. Hiyori is born as the sole heiress of the house of Hiragi. She and her adoptive elder sister, Sanae, grew up under the care of their aunt Iroha and uncle Daiki after their deaths of the entire family in a fire. Kagari had mysteriously disappeared beforehand, leaving the Gojos as the only remaining family that Hiyori and Sanae have left. Hiyori is eventually forced to marry her step-cousin, Jun, at age 13. He was 18 years old when they tied the knot, and out of respect for her, Jun agreed to wait until she was older to consummate the marriage. However, this never happened, as not long after, Jun died from the plague. Yukari stripped Hiyori of her title as Princess Dowager out of fear that her daughter-in-law would use Jun's death to seize the throne, which out of anger, Hiyori eventually makes her new goal. We see throughout the story Hiyori trying to come up with a strategy to reclaim the Kamakura throne and overthrow Yukari. One of the first things she does is become a vampire hunter alongside Sanae to avoid any marriage proposals her aunt and uncle might come up with. Hiyori ends up imprisoned at Fujiwara Castle after a failed attempt to kill Kanami. It is here that we are introduced to Kanami, Mai, and the rest of the main characters. And since we're here, let's talk about them a bit. Sayaka's parents died during the plague, and Sayaka was put under the care of her aunt and uncle, the Shidos. But they quickly became fed up with her, and Yukina took Sayaka under her wing, training her as a vampire hunter. But after meeting Kanami and Mai, Sayaka left Yukina and decided to stay at Fujiwara Castle instead. As for Ellen and Kaoru, they originally lived on the island kingdom of Osafune and worked for the Mokusa Republic. Kaoru was adopted by Ellen's parents after her family was killed by Yukari. However, it turns out that Ellen and Kaoru have a romantic relationship that, according to the Church of Amaterasu, is considered incestuous and therefore illegal, the punishment being death. One of the main struggles these two girls face is trying to keep their love a secret from everyone. They are eventually told by Sana to go to Fujiwara Castle and watch over Kanami and later Hiyori on Akane's orders. Their cousin, Chie, is a noblewoman, also part of the Mokusa Republic, who sent supplies and provisions to Fujiwara Castle to help with their survival. The reason why the Mokusa Republic is so fixed on keeping Kanami and Hiyori alive is because of a prophecy told hundreds of years ago about how they will supposedly defeat an evil queen, whom everyone assumes to be Yukari. More on that later. Anyway, let's now talk about the elite guards. Maki and Suzuka, of course, are lovers. Yomi is the bastard daughter of Yukina. To protect her reputation, Yukina entrusted her daughter to one of her loyal servants, Riku, and made him promise to keep Yomi's true identity a secret. As a result, Riku raised Yomi as his own adopted daughter, and Yukina eventually moved Yomi into the royal palace as one of the elite guards. Who Yomi's real father is unknown and will not be revealed until Arc 3. Yume doesn't appear until Arc 2 and isn't actually an elite guard, unlike in the anime. That will be explained in another video. Let's go back to the main characters. Kanami and Hiyori end up falling in love despite their differences, their romance being the main pairing of the story, of course. But after learning that Hiyori is at Fujiwara Castle with Kanami, Yukina secretly gets Yomi to kill them, with Maki and Suzuka voluntarily joining her. They launch an attack on Fujiwara Castle, and Kanami is mortally wounded. Hiyori manages to save her through something known as a blood bond. Through this, Kanami's power becomes stronger through Hiyori, and Hiyori is now immortal, immune to aging and sickness. However, her life is now tied to Kanami's, meaning that if Kanami dies, Hiyori will die as well. Now, it's about time I wrap this up. Kanami, Hiyori, Mai, Sayaka, Ellen, and Kaoru flee to the Mokusa Republic. And this is where Arc 1 of Bloody Crown ends. If you haven't read Bloody Crown yet and are interested in it, I will leave a link to it in the description box below. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave any in the comment section and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you soon.